morning. Welcome to the 4th edition of the Cisco Morning Huddle with Coach Brett West. I'm Lee Lewis. We're live here at First Financial Bank on Conrad Hilton in beautiful and beautifully wet Cisco, Texas this morning. Thank you for listening in. If you're close by, drop on in, have some refreshments, say hello, and be sure to thank all the folks here at First Financial Bank for sponsoring this weekly edition of the Cisco Morning Huddle. Big Damn Lobos chalked up another big win this past Friday night as they went on the road and defeated a promising Comanche Indian Club 42-14. Coach West, welcome into the show again. Congratulations on another big win for your club. How did your staff feel about the game after you watched film against Comanche?
We were excited about the bulk of it. I think the biggest disappointment was 14 penalties. Now, I don't know that that's ever happened to one of our teams in a very long time. I can't think back to a game that we played where we had 14 penalties. And going back, we probably deserved 3 of them. You know, that last penalty on Vernon Owings was not a hold. It was a touchdown that we had called back. But still, 13 out of 14 penalties. You know, in a big game, that's obviously going to hurt you. But for the most part, I felt like we did our job. You know, defensively, Coach Brunson stayed fairly base. We talked about that last week. We wanted to be able to stay base on defense and still get the job done. We did that for the most part. I mean, they could pick up their 4 yards when they really got down to it, but Coach Brunson didn't move fronts around. He didn't jump in that big 3. He didn't have to show that. For the most part, we still were able to play pretty solid defensively.
Well, talking about the defense, they weren't able to come up with another turnover for a touchdown last week, but they did come up with turnovers. Talk to everybody a little bit about the role of turnovers in a game, not just on defense, how it affects you offensively as well.
Field position is critical there. You know, you get a turnover, and obviously it's a letdown for the opposing team's offense, but you usually get pretty good field position out of it. And that's critical, especially at the beginning of the game. We started against Clyde inside the 5 on our 2 first possessions, and if we hadn't got it out of the hold, we'd have been stuck down there. But then later in the game, and again, I'm backing up all the way to Clyde because we had a lot of forced turnovers in that one. We had great field position after the turnovers. After the turnovers happened, we didn't have to go very far to score a touchdown. We had decent field position against Comanche. I felt like we pinned them back a few times, but turnovers are critical and definitely something we need tonight.
I know last week we were talking about the health of the team heading into the game with Comanche. You mentioned Mark Lara was taking over for Oscar. I believe it was an ankle injury. What's Oscar's status this week, and is the rest of the team relatively healthy going into that?
We are healthy. Mark Lara came in for Oscar and did a great job last week. I think Oscar will take limited reps. It's a low ankle sprain, but he rolled it again on Wednesday. He's still trying to recover from that. It just takes a little time, but luckily Mark came in and graded out 74%, which is, for our offensive line, that's a pretty good day. Felt like he had very few mental mistakes and blocked a big defensive tackle. And if you've seen Mark, he's about 5'5", 165 pounds, and he had the defensive tackle that he was up against had a 100-pound advantage on him, but Mark still got movement, and that's pretty important. If you can get movement with a 100-pound disadvantage, then you're trying pretty hard for your teammates. We were proud of him. And we feel like Oscar will be back going. It just may not be this week. I feel like he'll be completely healthy next week.
All right, so it sounds like everybody else is doing pretty good as well.
We are. We're healthy as of right now.
Knock on wood and keep that going. It's time for us to take our first break. We're live here at First Financial Bank in Cisco for the Cisco Morning Huddle. Glad you're listening in. Hope you can stop by. We'll be back on KATX 97.7 in 2 minutes. Went down to Godly. It was a win, 34-20, big game for them.
They had a great start too. You know, we got on those guys quick, and you know sometimes that hurts you. You get on somebody pretty quick, and then you have kind of a let up, and your kids feel like, hey, these guys are good, and you have some defensive letdowns, and all of a sudden they're right back in it. From what I understand, and I wasn't at that game, but I was told that their quarterback got loose on a couple of long runs. A couple of 70-yard runs that we gave up defensively. It led them back in the game, but they did have difficulty stopping us. I believe Case Gale scored twice on a couple of runs. Quarterback sneaks down inside their goal line, and Carson Taft scored from the fullback position. Dalton Kozar scored twice on a couple of toss sweeps, and for the most part, Coach Adams was pretty pleased with their offensive line. Felt like we handled some very big techs. I think they were immense. 6'3", 250 range at the JV level is difficult to block. When we didn't get them blocked, we ran around them. So he was fairly pleased, other than just those 2 long quarterback sweeps that they hurt us with in the second quarter.
Of course, then on the flip side here in Cisco, junior high teams were taking on Godly last night and split, I guess, but despite the split, still played pretty good from what I understand.
Yes, 7th grade won 28-0. Big win for them. They lost a close one last week to Comanche, but this week they rose to the occasion. And Matthew Wilson had an interception for a touchdown and also scored a rushing touchdown. Cooper Witt scored a rushing touchdown and threw another touchdown to Eli Batiste. So you have an interception return and a touchdown pass at 7th grade level. It was a great event. So I wished I'd have seen that. But coaches were pretty pleased with it. They were fired up in 7th grade and how well they competed. And really, 8th grade, we felt like we played almost over our head yesterday. They got beat 20-26, but we were definitely outnumbered. They had an unbelievable quarterback that we contained fairly well. You know, we're having to sit there in that 53 at that 8th grade level right now, so we're giving up the 4 verticals. I know they scored a 70-yard touchdown on 4 verticals. Hopefully we can kind of find a way to move out of that 53 and into a 4-3. We're hurting a little bit on the skill depth, so it's kind of causing some issues with personnel from making that adjustment. But Orson Silva had an awesome game, scored 3 touchdowns. He also led the team in tackles from the safety position. And big offensive tackle Adam Reed, he's also a defensive lineman, had a great game. He had several pancake blocks.
Before we get into tonight's opponent in this segment, let's visit for a minute or two about the results from the district last week. Just kind of get your feel for what happened. San Saba got what I would assume would have to have been a big win against Ballinger, 14-0. Coleman seems like they're on a little bit of a roll. They beat early 34-0. Colorado City got a big win against Coahoma, 45-8. And then Hico and Hamilton, that's always a huge grudge match there, 20-14 Hico. And then Hamlin, 33-6 over Hawley, might have raised a few eyebrows too.
That was probably the biggest surprise. Hamlin, and I know Coach Lucas well over there and talked to him, and he is supposed to be quite a bit better this year, but still we assumed that Hawley would make that a much closer game and was unable. It's surprising also is San Saba defeating Ballinger. We have some pretty close friends coaching at San Saba, and I know they feel like they're down this year. Ballinger is young, and I talked to their head coach a couple of weeks ago, and they're going through some growing pains. I know they have a few injuries, but it's still a surprising score. And that Hico-Hamilton game is always big. Of course, I've coached in Hico for 7 years, and that's like I would say like the Eastland-Cisco matchup in the good old days. It is very intense football game. Coach Wood said Hamilton had a couple of athletes that were injured and didn't know if they would return all year long. Said one of them is their tailback, and he is their biggest source of speed. And he went out with a knee injury. Wasn't too sure about him. But right now, Hamilton, who has a lack of depth anyway, even more of a lack of depth than they had last year, also has the injury bug, and that's going to be a problem for them until they can get healthy.
So going forward, even into this week, our district maybe, at least to people who look at it from the outside, probably think that a lot of teams are underperforming as we have 2 weeks left before district starts.
Well, then we'll start all over, and that's the thing about district. We'll start all over we'll erase all those losses and go on, and that's the scary thing about district as well.
All right, that's it for the second segment here at First Financial Bank in Cisco. I want to invite everybody to drop by. We still got one more segment to go. You're listening to the Cisco Morning Huddle on KTX. We'll be back in 2 minutes. Cisco on a gloriously wet day. Hope you're enjoying the rain out there. Coach West talking about tonight's opponent, Godly. You guys are facing a team that's lost its opening game to a 3A Ferris squad that's undefeated at this point. And then they followed that up by winning pretty easily over the next 2 opponents last week. They dispatched a typically strong Boyd Yellow Jacket team, 41-13. Talk a little bit about the challenges that your team has tonight going up against this Wildcat football team.
I think the biggest challenge both sides of the ball is just trying to manhandle people that are a lot bigger and stronger than us. You know, that was the case we ran into last year. They are a pretty football team when they suit up. A couple of 6'4", 250s that play some defensive tackle, great middle linebackers. They've got a lot of kids that they rotate in at those defensive linemen. They can put in a quick group. When I say quick, I mean they're as fast as we are, that they roll in for those 6'4" defensive tackles that kind of give them a little different look and keep them fresh. We really don't know what we're scheming tonight offensively. It's kind of a problem. If the 6'4", 250-pounders stay in there, we're obviously going to try to cut them down and run around them. But when they bring in that quicker crew, we feel like we can get our fullback offense going. So we'll be kind of playing some games with them. We'll be watching how they bring in off the sideline. They run three fronts, which is going to be an issue for us. We've had trouble blocking one front all year long. Just seems to be some mental issues that we're having and trying to get that coached. So three fronts has definitely been an issue in practice. Coach White's about ready to pull his hair out. We're going to see a 4-3 as a base. They jump into a 3-4 at some. They like to slant that to the strong side of the field. We feel like when we put a tight end in the game, which we will, that they'll slant to him even on the short side of the field. They run a goal line, then they run just what we call psycho that turns into a goal line out of the 4-3 and that 3-4 look that's given us trouble all week long. You know, we feel like we're faster than them. We feel like that. We feel like we can get to the edge. But last night at the junior high and JV levels, they ran 9 techniques. That was something that we haven't seen on video. Comanche did that to us as well. And if they're going to do that, then we've got to be able to block down those tackles, those big tackles that have such a weight advantage against us, and kick those ends out and run underneath. That'll be the decision we just have to make and have to get that accomplished. Who knows what the weather's going to do? We feel like we can throw the ball a little bit, but Colton Kent has very small hands. He's just not going to handle a wet ball very well. And running the midline and veer and all the reads that we allow him to do out of that gun, it causes some issues with a wet ball on the turnovers. So we're kind of worried about the possibility of turnovers, obviously, when it's raining outside. But hopefully we'll manage that. I think the last cold, wet game that we ran into was against Holiday, and I think we went that entire game in the playoffs in 2011 without a turnover. So hopefully that will mix in tonight. You know, defensively, we're having to run into the same issue. They have a big offensive line. I mean, again, they are pretty when they suit up. And having to protect ourselves from being blocked down and kicked out, that's something that Comanche was able to do fairly well last week with a pretty good offensive line, and that these guys are better at it. We don't feel like they throw the ball as well as Comanche, and we can't contain Comanche's quarterback extremely well. It'll be a similar situation tonight. We've got to contain him. We've got to prevent the deep pass, but we are going to pile a few more people in there this week because of their size and their ability to run those powers and leads.
Going into this fourth game, you guys have faced pretty much two wide open offenses, and now you're facing another team that likes to grind it out, as you just alluded to. How is this game going to help prepare your team for the tough games ahead next week and then moving into district?
Oh, it's very important. You know, that it's almost like a play. You know, this is somebody I think that you would play that first or second round of the playoffs. So you're getting that experience before district. Now, if you can stay healthy out of it, to me, that's the biggest fear. I'm not too concerned about winning or losing the game. I'm concerned about staying healthy and then having to play Stanford the next week. And that's always a playoff concern. So you're looking at a playoff game tonight, kind of type of atmosphere. Although if you lose, you get to play next week. But you're always worried about, can we stay healthy for that next big game that's coming, which is Stanford. So it's a lot like playing a bi-district football game tonight. In that realm of things, we have to stay healthy to be able to play with Stanford the next week, and that's a concern.
Well, certainly the weather has an opportunity to mess things up potentially tonight as far as what you're trying to accomplish on the field. But I think if there's anything positive going into this, and you can comment on this through what you've seen take place through several years now, the Lobos have a field that you're not going to have to worry about mud being out there being an issue. And how much does the weather really bother the team when you have a field like the one that we have here at Chesterfield?
Well, if it's not raining, we're going to be fine as far as the ball's going to be dry, and it's because the field does drain very, very well. Even in a downpour, the field's going to be fine. It's going to be way better than that old muddy field that we played on in 2002. We called the Mud Bowl. We had Holly come into town, and I ruined every uniform that we bought that year. The taxpayers were out $100 a piece trying to pay for them. It was a miserable affair. So the field will be fine. It's just, is it going to be raining? Is there going to be moisture on the ball at the snap? Are we going to be able to get our exchange down out of the gun? Can Kent throw the football and get it to our receivers somehow without that falling out the backside? Those kind of things. And can we read our midline and veer without turnover? That's maybe my biggest concern. And not just midline and veer, but all of our Washingtons, all the things we do out of that gun. Ken we're allowing him to read about 50% of that offense. So there's a mesh point that takes place, and if there's a little bit of indecision, then we're putting the ball on the ground.
Definitely want to avoid that tonight, but we certainly do appreciate the rain. Before we end this last segment, I'd like to maybe get you to comment or talk about, what game is it this week around the rest of the district that you guys are looking at with interest. Ballinger goes too early tonight. Coleman has a big game with Bangs. That's kind of a grudge match there, too. Colorado City has a Stanford team that you guys have next week, and then Paulding, Merkel, and Hamilton and San Saba round out the rest of the district schedule.
Well, we're interested in that Stanford game because we play them next week, and Colorado City is we feel like one of the better teams in our district. Colorado City's got it going right now in the passing game, and I don't know how the weather will affect that. Both those teams like to throw the ball, so we're pretty interested in that. We want to know if Colorado City can kind of hold on to their own and keep that a close game in the fourth quarter. So I'd like to see that.
All right, there you have it. Last segment, just about to wrap up here at First Financial Bank in Cisco. We appreciate everything they do for us, hosting us every week. Also want to remind everybody, 7 o'clock pregame tonight on KWBY 98.5 and KWBYradio.com. 7:30 kickoff here at Chesley Field. Lobos and Wildcats. Be sure to come on out. Bring a poncho or umbrella or whatever you need to get out here tonight and support the Lobos. That just about does it. Appreciate you being here again today.
Thanks, Louie.
Great luck tonight against Godly. For everybody that's been a part of this one, I want to say thanks to Matt back in the studio running the board, and Blakeney making sure that we're still on the line, and Coach Les being here today. Be sure to stay tuned for the Maverick Morning Huddle over in Eastland here in just a few minutes. This has been a production of KTX Sports. Thanks, and we'll see you next week.